The last pot of coffee had been sitting on the burner for 40 minutes, and Elena Ward knew it would taste like diesel by now. She didn't care. The 12 men occupying the corner booth weren't the kind to complain about bitterness. They'd rolled in around 11. 8 Harleys and 2 pickup trucks pulling a flatbed trailer, wearing faded leather cuts with the red Mesa Riders patch stitched across the back. They'd ordered eggs, bacon, toast, and enough coffee to keep a hospital ward awake through surgery. Elena moved between tables with practiced economy, clearing plates and wiping down the Formica surfaces that hadn't been replaced since the diner was built in 1974. The overhead fluorescence buzzed in that particular frequency that made everything look slightly underwater. Outside, Route 191 stretched into the Arizona dark like a black ribbon pulled taut between distant towns. She didn't realize she was humming until she was already deep into the melody. It wasn't a song with words. It had never had words, at least none she'd ever known. It was a sequence of notes her mother used to hum against her hair when she was small, a lullaby made of breath and warmth, and the particular vibration of a woman's chest against a child's ear. Elena hummed it when she was tired, when her hands were busy and her mind was empty, when the world reduced itself to simple tasks performed in dim light. The melody moved through 6 ascending notes, paused on a sustained 7th, then cascaded down in a pattern that didn't belong to any song Elena had ever heard on the radio. It was hers. It was private, and she was humming it now over dirty coffee cups and scattered sugar packets without thinking. The laughter at the corner booth stopped. Not gradually. It stopped the way an engine cuts when you pull the ignition wire. One moment there was the low rumble of men's voices overlapping, someone's graveled anecdote about a border run, the clink of ceramic, and then nothing. Elena looked up. 12 men stared at her. The youngest, maybe mid-30s, had his fork suspended between his plate and his mouth, a strip of bacon dangling. The oldest, a man with a silver beard trimmed close to his jaw and hands like weathered leather, held his coffee cup frozen at chest height, his knuckles white around the ceramic. The man at the head of the table stood up. He was tall, 6'2" or 6'3", with iron-gray hair pulled back and a face that looked like it had been carved from desert rock and then softened, just slightly, by years. His cut read President on the left breast, and beneath it, Jonah Mace Rourke. Where did you learn that? His voice was quiet, not threatening, quiet in the way a man's voice gets when he's hearing something impossible. Elena set down the coffee pot. Learn what? That melody, the one you were just humming. She glanced around the table. Every pair of eyes was fixed on her. A woman sitting beside the vice president, mid-40s, sharp-featured, with the calm bearing of someone accustomed to crisis, had gone pale beneath her tan. My mother used to sing it to me, Elena said. Every night when I was little. It's just something she made up. Jonah didn't move. His gaze shifted, not to Elena, but past her, to the wall behind the counter where the diner's owner had hung a collection of framed photographs spanning decades. Rodeo winners, local football teams, flood relief volunteers. Elena turned to follow his eyes. The photograph was old, sun-faded behind glass that hadn't been cleaned in years. It showed a group of people in front of a medical tent, men in riding gear, women in nurses' scrubs, all of them squinting into bright desert light. A banner behind them read Mesa County Disaster Relief, 2000. At the center of the group stood a woman with dark blonde hair and a wide, open face. She was smiling with her whole body, one hand raised in a wave, and hanging from a thin chain around her neck was a pendant, a crescent moon, silver, no larger than a thumbnail. Elena's hand moved involuntarily to her own chest, where beneath her uniform, against her skin, she wore the same shape. The woman at the table, Tessa, Elena would learn later, spoke first. That's Lila. That's Lila Vane. Jonah's jaw tightened. He looked at Elena with an expression she couldn't parse, something between grief and recognition and the sharp edge of a man who's just seen a ghost. Lila Vane disappeared 25 years ago, he said. She was our field medic. Our family. And that song, he stopped. Swallowed. She only ever sang it inside the medical tent. After patches. After stitches. Only for us. Elena felt the world shift beneath her like a tectonic plate adjusting. She gripped the edge of the counter. I don't know who that woman is, she said carefully. My mother's name is Catherine Ward. She raised me in Flagstaff. She's been dead for 3 years. Silence held the room like a fist. Then Jonas said, "Can I see that necklace?" Elena's hand closed over the pendant through her shirt. "No," she said. Not because she was afraid, though something close to fear was moving through her now, but because she was not the kind of woman who gave strangers access to the most private things she owned simply because they asked. "Not until you tell me what's going on." "All of it." Jonah looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly, as if she'd passed a test he hadn't known he was administering. "Fair enough," he said. "But not here. Not tonight." He pulled a card from his vest pocket. Plain white. A phone number printed in black. "Call that number tomorrow, if you want answers. We'll be at the Mesa compound until Thursday." Elena took the card. The 12 riders paid their bill in cash, left a 40% tip, and filed out into the night without another word. Through the window, she watched their taillights disappear down 191, red points swallowed by distance and dark. She stood alone in the empty diner, holding the card in one hand and the moon pendant in the other, and for the first time in her life, the lullaby felt less like comfort and more like a question. Elena didn't call the next morning. She waited 2 days, turning the card over in her fingers at night, running internet searches that led nowhere. Lila Vane returned nothing. Red Mesa Riders gave her a barebones website with a P.O. box address and a mission statement about veteran support and disaster relief. No names. No photographs. On the second night, she drove to the diner on her day off, stood on a chair, and lifted the photograph off the wall. Marcus, the owner, barely looked up from his crossword. "Bring it back," was all he said. She sat in her truck under the parking lot's single sodium light and studied the image. The woman at the center, Lila Vane, they'd called her, had Elena's cheekbones, the same slightly asymmetric mouth, and the pendant was unmistakable, a crescent moon with a tiny star set into the curve, visible even in the grainy print. Elena had always been told the necklace was a gift from her birth mother, a woman Catherine Ward described only as a friend who couldn't keep you safe, so she asked me to. Catherine had never offered more, and Elena, out of loyalty to the woman who'd raised her, had never pushed. But Catherine was gone now, and the question was here. She called the number the next morning. The voice that answered wasn't Jonas. It was a woman's, crisp and professional. "Red Mesa compound." "Who's calling?" "Elena Ward, the waitress from the diner." A pause. "Hold on." 3 minutes of silence. Then, "Come to the compound at 2. I'll text you the address. Bring the necklace." The compound turned out to be a ranch property 15 miles outside of town. A main house, 2 outbuildings, a row of covered parking shelters for the bikes, and a separate structure with a painted sign reading archives above the door. Elena parked her truck by the gate and walked the gravel path to the main house, where Jonah was waiting on the porch with 2 cups of coffee. He didn't waste time on small talk. "Tessa's inside. She's the one who knew Lila best. She can tell you what we know, but I want to be straight with you first." He handed her a cup. 25 years ago, Lila Vane walked away from this club. No goodbye, no explanation we understood at the time. She left behind a locker full of medical supplies and a reputation that got complicated. Some people said she'd stolen from the disaster relief fund. She was never charged, but she was never cleared either. "And you believed it?" Jonah's face didn't change, but something behind his eyes flinched. "I wasn't president then. I was 29, a road captain, and I trusted the men above me. So yes, I believed it. We all did." Elena let that sit. She sipped the coffee, strong, clean, nothing like the diner's burnt offering. "What changed your mind?" "Nothing. That's the problem. Nothing changed my mind until you hummed that song 2 nights ago, and I realized I'd spent 25 years never asking the right questions." He set his cup on the porch railing. "Come inside. Let Tessa show you what we've got." The archives building was organized with military precision, filing cabinets labeled by year, shelving units holding boxes of photographs, old meeting minutes, financial records. Tessa Quinn was waiting at a long table with a box already open before her. "I was 22 when I met Lila," Tessa said without preamble. She had steady hands and the kind of direct gaze that came from years of looking at wounds without flinching. "She trained me. Field medicine, triage, how to stitch a man up in the back of a moving van." And she sang. Always that melody, no words, just the tune. She said words would make it a real song, and she wanted it to stay private. just for the people she was healing. Tessa pulled a cassette tape from the box. The label read, Mesa Relief OPS, Field Recordings, 2000. This was recorded during the flash flood response in Cedar, Washington. Background audio from the medical tent. She slid it into a battered tape player on the table and pressed play. Static. The sound of wind against canvas. A man groaning. And then, beneath it all, threading through the chaos like a silver wire, the melody. The same 6 ascending notes. The same sustained 7th. The same cascade. Elena's throat tightened. She heard her childhood in that thin, crackling audio. She heard Catherine's voice layered beneath it, because Catherine had hummed it too, every night, with the same phrasing, the same breath patterns. Learned, Elena realized now. Learned from listening. Learned from the woman in the photograph. That's her, Tessa said quietly. That's Lila. Elena sat down. The chair scraped against the concrete floor. She looked at the tape player as if it might offer more context, explanation, the 25 years of silence rendered into something comprehensible. This proves she sang the song, Elena said. It doesn't prove she's my mother. Tessa nodded. No, it doesn't. But this might start to. She pulled a second item from the box, a laminated volunteer roster from the Cedar Wash disaster response. Elena scanned the names and stopped. Under Logistics/Dispatch, third entry, Catherine Ward, Communications Coordinator. Her mother's name, her adoptive mother's name, on the same volunteer list, at the same disaster site, in the same year. They knew each other, Elena said. They worked together, Tessa corrected, for 3 weeks during the worst flooding Mesa County had seen in 40 years. Elena stared at the list. 2 women, one who disappeared, one who appeared in Elena's life with a baby and a lullaby, and no husband in sight. The connection was obvious. But obvious wasn't proof. I need more than this, Elena said. I need something that connects Lila Vane to me specifically. Not just to my mother. To me. Jonah, who had been standing in the doorway, spoke. There's one more thing. But it's not here. It's in Lila's old locker. The one we sealed when she left. He hesitated. Opening it means the whole club knows we're looking into this. Means questions. Means people who were around back then might not like what we find. Elena met his eyes. Open it. He held her gaze for a moment, then nodded. Tomorrow. I'll call a vote tonight. She drove home with the windows down, the desert air dry and sharp against her face. The melody ran through her head on an endless loop, but now it carried a second voice beneath it. Ghostly, recorded, 25 years removed, and Elena couldn't tell anymore whether the song was a comfort or a summons. The vote passed unanimously, though Tessa told Elena later that 2 of the older members had argued fiercely before casting their hands up. They remember the accusations, she said. They're afraid of what it means if Lila was innocent. The locker was in a storage unit the club kept at an industrial park on the edge of town. Jonah drove there in his truck with Tessa riding passenger. Elena followed in her own vehicle. The unit was climate-controlled, unusual for a biker club's overflow storage, and Elena understood why when she saw the contents. Rows of archival boxes, old club records, and a single military-style footlocker with Vane L stenciled on the lid in fading paint. Jonah cut the padlock with bolt cutters. The lid opened on oiled hinges. Someone had maintained it, even after all these years, and the contents were sparse. A folded nurse's smock, a stethoscope, a stack of field reports bound with a rubber band, and at the bottom, wrapped in a cloth, a medical identification tag on a beaded chain. Elena picked it up. The tag was standard issue, stainless steel, stamped with a name and ID number. But someone had taken a Dremel tool or a fine file to the surface, grinding away the original information and restamping it. The current face read, Lila Vane, RMR Medical, ID number 4471. Turn it over, Tessa said. Elena flipped the tag. On the reverse, barely visible beneath the restamped surface, the ghost of the original engraving showed through. Lila Morrow, Mesa County EMS, ID number 2209. Her real name was Morrow, Elena said. Tessa nodded. She changed it when she joined the club's relief team. We never asked why. Volunteers did that sometimes. People running from bad marriages, debts, whatever. We didn't push. Elena ran her thumb over the ground-down metal. Someone filed this down on purpose. This wasn't casual. This was someone erasing an identity. Or protecting one, Jonas said. Elena looked at him. I need to find records under Lila Morrow. Birth certificates, marriage records, hospital admissions. If she had a child. That's county records, Tessa interrupted. And police dispatch archives. Your father, she caught herself. Your adoptive father, Gavin Ward. He was a police dispatcher. The name landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. Elena set the medical tag down carefully on the locker's lid. Her father, Gavin Ward, 60 years old, retired, living in a house in Flagstaff with a dog and a garden and 20 years of silence packed into his closets, had been a dispatcher, had worked communications, had been, she now understood, exactly the kind of man who would have been present at a disaster relief operation in the year 2000. I need to talk to my father, she said. We can go with you, Jonah offered. No. The word came out harder than she intended. She softened it. Not yet. If he's been hiding this for 25 years, 12 bikers on his lawn won't make him talk. It'll make him dig in. She was right, and she knew it the way you know the landscape of a person you've loved your whole life. Gavin Ward was gentle, but he was built like a vault door when he felt cornered. She would need to approach him as a daughter, not as an investigator flanked by muscle. But she wasn't ready to go alone, either. Not yet. Give me the tag, she said to Jonah, and a copy of that volunteer roster. I'll go to the county records office first. If I can find a birth record for a child under Lila Morrow, I'll have something concrete before I face him. Jonah hesitated. The tag was evidence, irreplaceable, but Elena held his gaze steady. You asked me to trust you, she said. This is the other direction. He handed it over. The Mesa County Records Office was a low cinder block building that smelled of old paper and toner. Elena filled out a request form for birth records under the surname Morrow, narrowing the date range to 1993 through 1996. The clerk, a thin woman with reading glasses on a beaded chain, disappeared into a back room and returned 20 minutes later with a single photocopy. Certificate of live birth. Baby girl. Born March 14, 1995. Mother, Lila and Morrow. Father, unlisted. Place of birth, Mesa County General Hospital. The baby's name was blank. The line read simply, unnamed female Morrow. Elena stared at the document until the clerk asked if she was all right. She nodded, folded the paper into her jacket pocket, and walked out into the afternoon sun. She sat in her truck for 15 minutes, hands on the steering wheel, not driving. A child born in 1995 would be 31 years old now. Elena was 31, born in March, raised by a woman who'd worked alongside Lila Morrow at a disaster site, wearing a necklace identical to the one around Lila's neck in a photograph taken 5 years after that birth. The melody rose in her throat unbidden. She pressed her lips together and held it inside. Then she started the engine and drove toward Flagstaff. Gavin Ward's house sat on a quiet street lined with ponderosa pines, the yard neat and the porch swept clean. His truck was in the driveway, a good sign. Elena parked behind it and sat for a moment, watching the living room window where the blue glow of the television flickered. She hadn't called ahead. Calling would give him time to prepare, to construct the careful explanations he'd been building for 3 decades. She needed to see his face in the first unguarded second. She knocked. Footsteps. The door opened. Gavin Ward was 60 but looked older, the kind of aging that comes from carrying weight invisibly. He had kind eyes, a mechanic's hands despite never having been a mechanic, and the slight stoop of a tall man who'd spent decades hunching over dispatch consoles. Ellie. Surprise, then warmth, then, there it was, a flicker of something else. His gaze dropped to her hand, where she held the medical tag visible between her fingers. The metal caught the porch light. The warmth drained from his face like water from a cracked vessel. Come in, he said quietly. She followed him to the kitchen. He filled the kettle, an automatic gesture, the ritual of a man buying time. Elena sat at the table where she'd done homework as a child, where Catherine had served pot roast on Sundays, where the family had existed in its careful, constructed peace. Her name was Lila Morrow, Elena said. Gavin didn't turn from the stove. His shoulders rose, held, and fell. Yes. And you've known this entire time. Yes. The kettle began to hiss. He still didn't turn. Dad, look at me. He did. His eyes were wet but steady. The eyes of a man who'd rehearsed this moment in his nightmares for 25 years and found the reality both better and worse than he'd imagined. "Tell me," Elena said. "Everything." He sat down across from her. The kettle screamed. Neither of them moved. Finally, Elena reached over and switched it off. "It was during the Cedar Wash flood," Gavin began. His voice had the measured cadence of a man giving testimony. Dispatcher's training, Elena realized, the habit of clarity under pressure. "I was running communications for the county response. Catherine was on my team. And Lila was the best field medic I'd ever seen. Tireless, fearless. She'd wade into floodwater to pull people out. The riders, the Red Mesa boys, they worshipped her." He paused, rubbed his thumb along the edge of the table. 3 weeks into the operation, Lila came to me. Not to Catherine, to me. Because I had access to the dispatch logs, the supply manifests, the transport records. She said the numbers didn't add up. Medical supplies, antibiotics, surgical kits, trauma packs, were being signed out in quantities that didn't match the patient logs. Someone was diverting them, selling them. Who? Gavin's face tightened. The county emergency coordinator, man named Dale Pruitt. He was running a side operation, skimming supplies from the relief stockpile and selling them through a contact in Phoenix. Lila had documentation, photographs of falsified sign-out sheets, recorded conversations. And she gave them to you. She gave them to me because she trusted me to get them to the right people. Internal affairs. The inspector general. Someone with authority. His voice cracked, the first break in his composure. And I did. I passed everything up the chain. But Pruitt had connections. Friends in the county board. The investigation was buried before it started. Elena's hands flattened on the table. And then Pruitt found out who'd reported him. Not through me, through a leak in the IA office. He threatened Lila directly. Told her he'd make the theft charges stick to her instead. He had the paperwork to do it. She'd been signing supply requisitions as the field medic, and he'd altered the quantities on the copies he kept. Her signature, his numbers. The picture assembled itself in Elena's mind with terrible clarity. A woman with evidence. A powerful man with forged documents. And a baby, Elena, caught between them. She came to Catherine and me on a Thursday night. Gavin continued. You were 5 years old. She was terrified. Not for herself, for you. She said Pruitt had made it clear that if she stayed, if she kept pushing, he'd make sure she went to prison. And you'd end up in the system. So she gave me to you. She asked us to keep you safe. To raise you. To never use her real name around you. In case Pruitt was still watching. Catherine, your mother. She loved you from the first night. That was never a lie, Ellie. That part was never false. Elena absorbed this. Her chest felt compressed, as though the air in the room had thickened. And the song. Gavin smiled, a small, pained thing. Catherine asked Lila what to do if you cried at night. Lila hummed the melody. Said it was the only thing that always worked. She taught it to Catherine right there in our living room. And then she walked out the door, and we never saw her again. Is she alive? I don't know. I never looked. I was afraid that looking would draw attention. That Pruitt died, Elena said. She'd found that in the county records while searching for the birth certificate. Dale Pruitt, deceased 2014, heart attack. 11 years ago. Gavin stared at her. I didn't know that. You didn't look. I was afraid, he said again, and the word came out like a confession. Elena stood. She picked up the medical tag from the table, turned it over in her hand. Lila Morrow beneath the grinding marks, and put it in her pocket. The Red Mesa Riders are looking for her, she said. They have resources. Contacts. They want to help. Gavin's expression shifted, alarm, protectiveness, the old instincts rising. Ellie, those men. Those men are the reason I found out who I am. And they're ready to admit they were wrong about her. Which is more than, she stopped. She didn't want to say it. She didn't want to make this a weapon. But Gavin finished it for her. More than I did. Elena didn't deny it. She crossed the kitchen, kissed her father on the forehead, because he was still her father, would always be her father, and love is not diminished by anger, and walked out the door. In her truck, she called Jonah's number. He answered on the second ring. She's alive, Elena said. Or she was 11 years ago, when the man who threatened her died. The county coordinator, Dale Pruitt. He's the one who framed her. He's been dead since 2014. Silence on the line. Then Jonah. So she's been free. For 11 years. And she never came back. Would you come back? To the people who believed you were a thief? The silence this time lasted longer. When Jonah spoke, his voice was rough. What do you need from us? I need someone who can search public records across state lines. If she changed her name when she left, she'd have needed new credentials, nursing license, social security, all of it. There'll be a paper trail. Tessa can do that. She's got contacts in the medical licensing boards from her army days. Then tell her to look for a Lila, any last name, who applied for a nursing or EMT license between 2001 and 2005 in any state bordering Arizona. She would have used her actual qualifications. She couldn't have faked those. I'll call Tessa now. Elena hung up and sat in the dark cab, looking at her father's house. The living room light was off now. She imagined him sitting in the dark kitchen, carrying the same weight he'd always carried. Only now it was shared, and sharing made it heavier and lighter at once. Tessa found her in 3 days. The paper trail was faint but unbroken. A woman named Lila Mercer had obtained an emergency medical technician license in New Mexico in 2002, listing training credentials that exactly matched Lila Morrow's original certification dates. The address on file was a community health clinic in a small town called Arroyo Seco, 40 miles north of Santa Fe. Elena stared at the address on Tessa's laptop screen. The cursor blinked beside it like a heartbeat. That license was renewed 2 years ago, Tessa said. Which means she's still there. Still working. Elena's hands were trembling. She pressed them flat against her thighs. You're sure it's her? The training dates matched to the day. The original certifying institution, Mesa County Community College Emergency Services Program. It's the same one Lila Morrow graduated from in 1994. And I called the clinic. Asked if they had a Lila on staff. The receptionist said yes. Lila's been here longer than anyone. The room was quiet. They were in the compound's main house, Elena, Tessa, and Jonah around the kitchen table. Outside, the desert evening was settling in, the sky turning from copper to indigo. I want to go, Elena said. We'll ride with you, Jonah said. Elena shook her head. Not 12 of you. Not like some kind of cavalry charge. She left because she was afraid. Because she was betrayed. Showing up with an army doesn't fix that. It repeats it. Jonah leaned back in his chair. He was a man accustomed to solving problems with numbers and presence, and Elena was asking him to do neither. But he was also, she was learning, a man capable of listening when someone made sense. How many then, he asked. You. Just you. And me. In a truck, not on bikes. She looked at Tessa. And Tessa, if she'll come. Because Tessa knew her. Tessa was her student. Tessa nodded without hesitation. I'll come. But there's something you need to do first, Elena said, looking at Jonah directly. Before you stand in front of her. What? You need to decide what you're going to say. Not to me, to her. About what the club did. About what you believed. Jonah's jaw worked. The muscles in his face moved like weather crossing a landscape. Pride, shame, resistance, and finally something that looked like acceptance. I know what I have to say, he replied quietly. I've known for 3 days. I just didn't want to say it out loud until I had to. They left at dawn the next morning. Jonah drove his truck, a matte black Silverado with enough miles on it to have stories, with Tessa in the passenger seat and Elena in the back. The drive from Mesa County to Arroyo Seco was 6 hours across desert and mountain, through Gallup and Albuquerque, and up into the high country where the air thinned and the pines appeared. They didn't talk much. The radio played low, country stations fading in and out as they moved between signal ranges. Elena watched the landscape change and tried to imagine what she would say to a woman she'd never met but had carried inside her, in a melody, in a pendant, in the shape of her own face, for 31 years. Arroyo Seco was small, one main road, a general store, a church, and a cluster of adobe houses spreading out from a central plaza. The community clinic was on the south end of town, a single-story building painted pale blue, with a parking lot containing 4 cars and a bicycle rack. Jonah parked across the street. He didn't shut off the engine. How do you want to do this? He asked. Elena looked at the clinic. Through the front window, she could see a reception desk, a waiting area with plastic chairs, and, moving behind a partition, a figure in blue scrubs. I go in first, Elena said. Alone. As a patient. I want to see her before she sees me. Tessa put a hand on Elena's shoulder from the passenger seat. Take your time. Elena crossed the street. The clinic door opened with a small bell, a pleasant sound, domestic, the kind of thing that belonged to a life that had chosen quietness as its organizing principle. The receptionist was a young woman with turquoise earrings who smiled and asked how she could help. I'd like to see the nurse, Elena said. I've got a headache that won't quit. 2 days now. Sure thing. Fill this out. A clipboard. A form. Elena wrote a false address. She didn't want to leave traces, not yet, and sat in a plastic chair and waited. 10 minutes. 15. She studied the motivational posters on the walls, the pamphlets about flu shots and diabetes management, the small personal touches, a vase of dried wildflowers on the reception desk, a children's drawing taped to the partition. Elena, the receptionist. Lila will see you now. She stood. Her legs felt uncertain beneath her, as though the floor had developed a slope. She walked through the partition door and into a small examination room where a woman in blue scrubs was washing her hands at the sink. The woman turned. She was 56. Her hair was darker now, dyed, Elena thought, from what must have been the same light brown in the photograph, and cut shorter, practical. Her face had aged the way desert things age. Fine lines like river channels, skin tanned to leather, eyes that were simultaneously tired and alert. She was smaller than Elena had imagined. Somehow she'd expected the woman from the photograph to be larger than life. But Lila Mercer, Lila Morrow, Lila Vane, was 5'4" in her nursing clogs, with hands that looked strong but not large. Hi there, Lila said. Her voice was warm, professional, the voice of a woman who'd been putting people at ease in examination rooms for decades. What's going on with this headache? Elena couldn't speak. She was looking at Lila's face and seeing her own, the cheekbones, the asymmetric mouth, the particular way the eyebrows arched slightly higher on the left side. It was like looking into a mirror that showed the future. Lila's professional smile faltered. Her eyes, green, like Elena's, narrowed slightly. Something was registering. Not recognition, not yet, but the uneasy awareness that something in this room was not routine. Are you all right? Lila asked. She took a step closer, and her hand reached out, nurse's instinct, to touch Elena's wrist, checking for pulse, for tremor. Elena caught her hand, held it, and hummed. 6 ascending notes. The sustained 7th. The cascade. Lila's hand went rigid in Elena's grip. Her eyes widened, the green flooding with something that was too large for a single emotion, too complex for a single word. Her lips parted. No sound came out. Elena hummed the sequence again, slowly, carefully, each note placed like a stone on a path leading backward through time. No, Lila whispered. Not denial, shock. A woman hearing the impossible. Her free hand rose to her mouth. Her eyes moved over Elena's face, mapping it, measuring it, seeing in it what Elena had seen in hers. The cheekbones, the mouth, the eyes. My name is Elena Ward, Elena said. Catherine and Gavin raised me. You gave me to them in 2000, when I was 5 years old. You taught Catherine a song to sing me to sleep. Lila's knees gave. Elena caught her, both hands, firm grip, and lowered her into the examination room's single chair. Lila sat with her hands pressed over her face, her shoulders shaking, making no sound. Elena knelt beside her and waited. When Lila finally looked up, her face was wet, but her eyes were clear. How did you find me? The Red Mesa Riders, Elena said. I hummed the song in a diner. They recognized it. And now the fear came. Elena saw it move across Lila's face like shadow, the old terror, alive after all these years. They're here. 2 of them. Outside. They came to. Elena hesitated. They came to apologize. Lila shook her head rapidly. No, I can't. You don't understand what. I know what happened, Elena said. I know about Pruitt. I know about the supply theft and the forged documents. I know you ran to protect me. Lila stared at her. How? My father told me. Gavin. He told me everything. And Pruitt is dead. Has been for 11 years. The information landed visibly. Lila's body changed. Something in her spine released. A tension held so long it had become structural. She sagged in the chair as though a wire supporting her had been cut. 11 years, she said. I could have. For 11 years I could have. I know, Elena said. But you're here now. And so am I. They sat together in the small examination room, the fluorescent light humming above them, the sound of the receptionist's radio drifting faintly through the wall, and Elena held her mother's hand and waited for whatever would come next. It took an hour. Lila washed her face, closed the clinic early, citing a family emergency to the receptionist, who looked curious but asked nothing, and sat with Elena in the examination room while the afternoon light shifted through the blinds. Elena told her, "Jonah is outside. He wants to speak with you, but only if you're willing." Lila's first response was no. Her second response, 10 minutes later, was, "What does he want to say?" "He wants to admit the club was wrong. About you. About what they believed." Lila was quiet for a long time. Then, "I'll listen. But not inside. Not in a room. I spent too many years inside rooms being told things by men." They walked out through the clinic's back door, Elena first, then Lila, into the small gravel lot behind the building. Elena crossed the street and brought Jonah and Tessa around. The four of them stood in the late afternoon sun behind the clinic, the Sangre de Cristo mountains rising in the distance, the sky enormous and unobstructed above them. Tessa saw Lila and stopped. 25 years collapsed in the space between them. "Lila," she said. That was all. Her voice broke on the second syllable. Lila looked at her former student, older now, weathered, but still carrying the same directness in her stance, and something in her face softened. "Tessa, you grew up." "I did. You taught me how." Jonah stood apart. He was a big man, and he looked, in this moment, as though he wished he were smaller, as though his size and his leather and his decades of authority were all suddenly inappropriate for the task at hand. "Lila," he said. His voice was rough. She turned to face him. Her chin was up. Her eyes were steady. Whatever she'd been, frightened, running, hidden, she was not those things now. She was a woman who'd survived, and she stood on her own ground. Jonah took a breath. "In the year 2000, you came to the club for help. You had evidence of a crime. You were trying to do the right thing, for the people in that flood zone, for the operation, for all of us. And we—" He stopped. His throat worked. "We didn't believe you. We took Pruitt's version because it was easier. Because believing you meant believing that someone in authority was corrupt, and that was harder than believing a woman had stolen and run." He let the words stand in the open air. He didn't excuse. He didn't qualify. "I wasn't president then," he continued. "But that's not an excuse. I was there. I had a vote. And I voted with the men who said you'd betrayed us. I was wrong. The club was wrong. And you paid for our failure with 25 years of your life." Lila didn't speak. The mountain wind moved across the gravel lot, lifting dust in small spirals. "I can't give that back," Jonah said. "I know that. But I can make it public. We have records, the original disaster relief financial documents, Pruitt's altered sign-out sheets, the dispatch logs that show the discrepancies you found. Tessa's been compiling them. If you'll allow it, I want to present them to the club, all chapters, full assembly, and officially clear your name. Restore your record. Put it in writing that Lila Vane was not a thief, that she was a whistleblower who was punished for telling the truth." He paused. "And I want to do it publicly, not in a back room, not quietly, publicly, the same way the accusation was made." Lila looked at him for a long time. Her expression was unreadable, or rather, it was readable in too many directions at once. Elena watched her mother's face and saw anger and grief and exhaustion, and beneath all of it, something that might have been relief. The relief of being seen, of being believed, finally, by the people whose belief had mattered most. "You came all this way," Lila said. "In a truck." Elena said bikes would be too much. A ghost of a smile. She was right. Lila looked at her daughter. "She's smart." "She's yours," Tessa said softly. The wind blew. The mountains held their silence. And Lila turned back to Jonah and said, "Do it. Clear my name. But I want Elena there when you do." Jonah nodded. "Whatever you want." "And Jonah," she waited until his eyes were on hers. "I don't forgive you. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. But I believe you mean it. And that's where we start." He accepted this without protest. Some debts aren't settled in a single conversation. Some take years, and the willingness to stand still while someone decides what you're worth. They drove back 2 days later, all four of them in Jonah's truck, Lila in the back seat beside Elena, watching the desert pass in reverse through the window. She'd closed the clinic for a week, told the receptionist she was visiting family. It was, she said, the first true thing she'd told a coworker in 25 years. The memorial assembly happened on a Saturday at the Red Mesa compound, with 36 members present from 3 chapters. Jonas stood at the front of the room and read a prepared statement. He laid out the evidence, the sign-out sheets, the dispatch logs, Pruitt's falsified records, the medical tag with its ground-down name. He used the word failure 4 times. He used the word wrong 3. When he finished, the room was silent. Then a man in the second row, one of the older members, silver-haired, who'd been riding since before Jonah earned his first patch, stood and said, "I voted against her. I want that on record too." One by one, others stood. Not all of them, but enough. Enough to fill the room with the particular weight of men acknowledging a collective sin. Lila sat in the back row. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. That evening, after the assembly dispersed, after the handshakes and the awkward silences, and the 3 men who couldn't quite look Lila in the eye, Elena found her mother in the compound's kitchen. It was a large, industrial space, stainless steel counters, commercial ovens, a walk-in cooler, used for club events and charity feeds. But now it was empty, quiet, the overhead lights turned low. Lila was standing at the counter, both hands flat on the steel surface, looking at nothing. "Hey," Elena said. Lila turned. Her eyes were dry but tired, the fatigue of a woman who'd carried something for so long that putting it down felt like a different kind of weight. "It's strange," Lila said. "Being believed. After so long. You'd think it would feel like winning. But it just feels like something that should have happened a long time ago." "Yes." Elena leaned against the counter beside her. Their shoulders were nearly the same height. Elena had an inch on her, maybe 2. "I have a question," Elena said. "Ask." "The song. Why no words?" Lila smiled. It was small but real, the first fully real smile Elena had seen from her. "Because I'm a terrible lyricist. I tried once, wrote something about stars and rivers, and it sounded like a greeting card. The melody was better alone. It was enough." "It was enough," Elena agreed. They stood together in the empty kitchen, and then, without planning it, without signaling, Elena began to hum. The 6 notes, the sustained 7th, the cascade. And Lila joined her. 2 voices, the same melody, the same breath patterns, because some things are inherited not through blood alone, but through the particular physics of resonance, the way a daughter's lungs learn their capacity from the first chest she ever rested against. The kitchen's steel surfaces caught the sound and gave it back, warmer, doubled. The melody moved through its cycle once, twice, 3 times, each repetition layering over the last until the room was full of it, until there was no space for anything else. Not grief, not anger, not the 25 years of silence that had separated them. Just the song, sung by the 2 people for whom it had been made. They finished together. The last note hung in the kitchen air, sustained by the room's acoustics, and then faded. Lila reached out and took her daughter's hand. "I can teach you the words," she said. "I finally wrote some. Last night, in the truck, while you were sleeping." Elena laughed, a sound that surprised her, that came from somewhere deep and unclenched. "I thought you said you were terrible." "I am. They're awful. You'll love them." And standing there in the quiet kitchen, with the desert night pressing dark against the windows and the compound going still around them, Lila Morrow, Lila Vane, Lila Mercer, hummed the first bar and then, for the first time in the melody's 30-year existence, gave it words. They were simple. They were imperfect. They were enough. 3 months later, the Red Mesa Riders published a formal addendum to their chapter history, a document posted publicly on their website and read aloud at their annual ride, acknowledging the wrongful accusation against Lila Vane, detailing the evidence of her whistleblowing, and restoring her name to the club's roll of honor. Elena kept working at the diner. Lila kept working at the clinic. They called each other every Thursday evening, a day chosen for no particular reason except that it was the day they'd first been separated, and now it was the day they refused to be. And on quiet nights, when the diner was empty and the coffee was burning on its burner, Elena would hum the song. But now it had words. Terrible words. Words about stars and rivers that sounded like a greeting card. She hummed them anyway. Every note.